Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 138 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today's reading covers Psalm 75 through 78. And for my commentary today, I'm going to be looking at Psalm 78. Now, you would have noticed Psalm 78 is one of the rather lengthy psalms of the Scriptures. And so I just want to hit the highlights, really, of it. And some commentators will break this down in saying that this speaks of the 7 deadly sins for the nation of Israel. So here's sort of the theme or the parts where they went off track. And you'll notice these as you read through this passage. So rebellion, forgetfulness, faithlessness, covetedness, lies, ungratefulness, and idolatry. So think of how they rebel against God. They don't follow God's words and His command. They forgot. And that's really, if I was to pin my sort of theme of importance that comes from this passage, is remember what God has done for you. And it even has us reminding people to teach your children, and then the next generation, and their children, and their children. It has 5 generations which are mentioned here, saying to speak these to those generations, to remind them of what God has done. Now, this is a challenge for you. And I mentioned this the other day in sharing your conversion story. Have you gone out and shared your story of how you came to know the Lord, your conversion story, with your family or with your children? If you're not raising your children, telling them about how you came to have the relationship with Jesus that you do, first off, I would almost say, or ask, do you have a relationship with Jesus? Because why would you not want your children to know about your relationship with Jesus so that you could help them solidify their relationship with Jesus? I'm always amazed at how we have this sins that the fathers committed end up being the same sins that the child commits, and yet that's even from a father that's saved, but it's because he doesn't explain to the child, well, let me tell you, the reason why I don't drink alcohol now is because when I was your age, I went out and I got into trouble. And I did things that I shouldn't have done, and I knew that it was a sin against God. And that's when I came to know God. Now, this isn't my story, but what I'm saying is that's what parents need to start sharing with their children. Tell their children how they came to know the Lord. Because if not, the children will repeat that same life, and you really are ignoring what God's done in your life. So this passage really stresses the importance of repeating to the next generation and the generation after that generation what God has done. Let's just look at the opening of this. And remember, I talked about Asaph, where he was the one that's saying, oh Lord, why are the wealthy prospered? Why are they? Well, now he's the psalmist here. He's the author of this psalm. So remember, he was the choir director, if you will, for the priest serving at the tabernacle and later at the temple. So he starts out, verse 1 of chapter 78. Listen, O my people, to my instruction. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us. We will not conceal them from their children, but tell to the generation to come that the praises of the Lord and His strength and His wondrous works that He has done. So they will tell of all these things that the Lord has done. And we think of that when we're doing that when we have a Sunday school class, or even as we're preaching through the Word, we're proclaiming what God has done. But as I say, I just want to stress this. This to me is the part that I really get out of Psalm 78, and it's a part of what I've preached for many years, is you need to share with people what God has done and is doing in your life to help encourage others, especially when it's your own children or when it's those that you immediately have relationships with. Share with them what God's doing now. A church that I used to be a part of, they would have a testimony night once a month and have a time for people to come up and share testimony. But there was one stipulation, and that was it had to be something that happened within the past month. You couldn't share it if it was something that, 20 years ago, and it's not to make fun of people doing this, but I've been in another setting where every single time this one person would go up to give their testimony, and they were in their 60s, and we all of a sudden were back in their teen years, and every time they said the same thing. They never had anything that they gave testimony of that was something that had happened past their college age. So you were left with wondering, has God not done anything since this person was 23 years old? After that, God stopped working in their life, and they always were living. It'd be like if Moses on Mount Sinai said, all right, guys, y'all follow the pillar of cloud. I'm going to stay right here because this is where I met God. And that's sad to say. That's what many people have done, is they built their entire spiritual experience on an encounter that they had many years ago, rather than looking for God to be active and a part of their daily life right now. Now, I do want to say this part, and this is kind of slightly changing the subject. In verse 9 it says, the sons of Ephraim were archers equipped with bows, yet they turned their back in the day of battle. They did not keep the covenant of God and refused to walk in His law. Now, we actually, in the scriptures, don't have an account of this specific event happening with the sons of Ephraim coming out to battle or being a part of the battle and then just turning their backs and walking away. But it apparently was something that was clearly well known at this point in the history of Israel. And Ephraim was that tribe that they chose to not really enter into the promised land with the rest of the Hebrews. We're all right over here. We'll stay on this side of the Jordan. Yet they had been a rather prosperous tribe, but they turned their backs, and it said they did not keep the covenant of God and refused to walk in His law. Don't turn your back on God's word. Walk in His word. Walk in His laws. Too many people turn away. Well, this is a wonderful psalm, and a good psalm for you just to go through and look at what the Lord did in the past for Israel's history, and then pause and consider what He's done in your life. A number of occasions the Hebrews are told to use specific instances in their history to teach the children. One of those is Passover. It says when you're celebrating the Passover meal and the children ask, why do we do this? It says, then tell them, teach them, right? When the Hebrews cross through the Jordan River and God had stopped up the waters, when they do this, they then take the standing stones and erect them. And they said, these stones are stones of remembrance. So when your children ask, what do these stones mean? You tell them. Tell them what God did here. And then we also see the same thing in Deuteronomy chapter 6, where the Hebrews are told to teach these things to their children. We need to make sure that we are teaching the next generation. And I really believe that that's a part of what has happened in the decline of Christianity today, is that people got comfortable and they stopped sharing their conversion story. They stopped giving testimony of what God was doing in and around them. And it's almost like people forgot God. And then, as we kind of end off today, there's also the aspect of where it speaks of God providing the manna. And this psalm really brings to light how the people said, well, that we don't, this manna, that we want something else. And God gave them meat, but they turned their noses up at that which God had provided. And a lot of people do that this day and age too. God provides so much for us, but some are like, well, I'd rather have that over there. I'm really not happy with what God's given me. Yet what God has given us is perfect. God always gives us exactly what we need when we need it. And we need to trust Him. But brothers and sisters, I do hope that your day is going well. Until tomorrow, God bless.